So welcome everybody to our podcast in the series Leading in a Climate Changed World. It's an enormous pleasure and privilege today to welcome Dr. Gail Bradbrook to talk with us. Gail is the co-founder of the international social movement Extinction Rebellion. Gail has been involved in various campaigning groups in Stroud in England, including a period from 2010 to 2013 as voluntary director of Transition Stroud, an anti-fracking protest, various actions in opposition to the building of a local incinerator, and she's also been involved in tax justice campaigns and many other issues of social importance. And then in 2015, with George Barder, she set up the group Compassionate Revolution. That in turn morphed into Rising Up, out of which came Extinction Rebellion. So now she is very focused on that, protesting to raise awareness of the dangers from anthropogenic climate change, and believes that only civil disobedience on a large scale can bring about the change that is needed.
Rising Up is a network that's looked at various campaigns. So there's been hunger strikes on the steps of the Labour Party about Heathrow. There's been, and also actions at Heathrow Airport itself. There have been things around inequality in the London School of Economics to do with the pay of cleaners. There's been a focus on banking and democracy, and so it did a whole spectrum of things. And I guess that the purpose there was to test out some ideas and to come together as a team. And then in April last year, it was January last year when Roger Hallam proposed that we focused on climate change, and some of us were concerned that A, we weren't quite ready as a network, and B, how that could deal into eco-fascism if it's done badly, and that's still a concern that in actual fact. Literally were 15 of us in a cafe in Bristol. It took a while to think of a name. Rebellion that was really waiting to come, and I think we tapped into a zeitgeist. The ecological crisis is created by, in particular, a fake democracy, a non-functioning democracy, a broken, toxic economic system, and a toxic media. So in the language of Gene Sharp, they would be the three pillars holding this system in place. And then I think that there's a malaise underneath that, which some would name as the patriarchy. And on the face of that, I would say that Extinction Rebellion is pointing its arrow at, because you can just take out one pillar at a time, really, as I understand it. It's currently pointing its arrow at democracy. Okay. And to an extent, the media, because we have taken on the media and we've become our own media. So you're focused on democracy because we have three demands. One is for the government to tell the truth and work alongside the media to really tell people what's happening. The second is a rapid decarbonisation of the economy and a reduction in consumption to deal with the ecological overshoot, the biodiversity loss. The third one is that how we go about doing those things, the policies we have, is decided by a citizens' assembly. And they've been used before. You choose people by sortition and a kind of jury, and experts come and tell them what the situation is and what the possible changes are, and they decide. So that's really, we're essentially saying that governments are incapable of coming up with the policies. It needs people to get in a room and make these decisions.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, we're recording this at the time where the whole Brexit fiasco is playing out, and I think a citizens' assembly might be one way forward for that too.
It's been suggested.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I don't think there's much take up of it, but it's a good idea, I think. So I wonder if we could talk a bit about the nature of what you and others are willing to sacrifice, and what we all maybe need to sacrifice in order to bring about the changes that we're talking about. I mean, I think I'm right in saying you've already spent some time in jail, and certainly other people around you will need to spend time in jail in order to, because you believe in what you're doing, and that's sometimes the cost and the price that we need to pay. And we will all need to pay a price. We will all need to sacrifice a lot in order to bring about the changes that are needed. And I wonder if you could just talk with us a bit about sacrifice.
Sure. I mean, I've been arrested a few times. I'm up in court, I believe, on the 16th of April next. Some colleagues went to jail for a week as part of some air pollution campaigning. And in that way, of course, we'll all die at some point. So if I need to die in service to this process, then I'm at peace with that.
Yeah.
Maybe not,
Yeah.
want to, I'm not intending to, and I've got children to raise, but what I'm really trying to say is look at the nature of this crisis, the possibility of human extinction in our children's lifetime, and the extinction events that are happening. Really feel it, and then ask yourself what you're going to do about it. And if the social science says, as I can tell you it does, but do your own research, that civil disobedience is needed, I mean, for so many of us with so many privileges in Western democracies especially, it's not that big a deal getting arrested, to be honest. I wouldn't say that to somebody if they're having mental health issues, and you might not get such an easy ride if you're a black person. I'm not being naive here, but essentially, I find it quite restful, some hours in the cell, and I find it quite amusing. If I'm really honest. I find it appeals to a cheeky and possibly even slightly sexual side. I think it's a root energy, it's not, because if you feel like you can't break the law, well, the law is part of this machine at the minute. We don't have the laws that we should have in place. So if you really mean it, break the law, break them. And when we say break the law, I mean, get on the streets. Mm-hmm. Get on the streets. And that the revolutions that have happened in other countries, children are highly likely to be growing up in a world that's where society's collapsing. David Attenborough's talked about the collapse of society. It's not just some fringe thing that's been said. UN Secretary General's talked about human extinction as a possibility. They're going to be raised in that world, and what happens in a world like that is that fascism is likely to get a hold, that wars, people are going to want to send them to wars and so on. And then the idea that life isn't going to continue, I mean, that we're heating the planet to the same degree as happened during the Permian mass extinction event when 97% of all life went. Really breathe that in. It's a shock to really face that. Corporations are set for what they're about is not needed. And so they either have to, they have to go away or they have to change into what's needed, and really quickly. And the issue is the whole finance system, which you raised earlier, Robin, which is pointing at democracy is one thing. My own personal view is that Extinction Rebellion or some other movement's going to need to point at the economic system, and I would be massively in favour of a mass civil disobedience around finance, and what that would look like is refusing to pay debts and taking money out of the system and refusing to give it back, and putting it where it's needed. But we have to be very collectively sure of each other. I mean, just if anybody does do blockchain technologies out there, because I think we'd have to have people certifying, I'm going to refuse to pay my mortgage if 10,000 other people do it, so you couldn't press the go button and everybody's set up to go. I mean, I think that's what's going to be needed. I don't think this system is going to let go, because it's a machine that's in operation. We just have a real problem with the word hope in Extinction Rebellion. We've got one of our slides says hope dies, action begins, and Derek Jensen, who's a deep green activist, uses the word hopium. There's something about feeling hopeful that's quite pacifying. Hopefully that'll sort it out, So I'm not a great one for filling us with hope.
Welcome to Hard Talk. I'm Stephen Sacker. Back in 2015, the nations of the world made a formal commitment to act to keep global warming well below 2 degrees centigrade. So much for fine words. Global greenhouse gas emissions are still rising. The data suggests the planet is warming at an alarming rate. What to do about it? Well, my guest today is Roger Hallam, co-founder of Extinction Rebellion, a movement dedicated to mass resistance and civil disobedience. How far are the climate rebels prepared to go? The need now for Extinction Rebellion.
Well, I think the reason's really straightforward. Is millions of people around the world have realised that we've come to the point where something drastic has to happen. And nothing is happening. And that means we have to start breaking the law in order to make change. This was the decade when it was all supposed to start happening, wasn't it? But it's not. So people are very angry. People are in a rage. people don't want their kids to die.
You're saying that groups like Greenpeace and many, many others have fundamentally failed in their mission to convince the world that things need to change?
Yes, we fundamentally failed. I mean, I failed, other activists have failed, campaigners have failed, we've all failed. The fact of the matter is, we're facing mass starvation in the next 10 years, social collapse, and the possible extinction of the human race.
As you are suggesting, it is possible, for example, in the United Kingdom, where the group was founded, that we could, in the UK, move to net zero carbon emissions by 2025. And that really isn't possible.
Of course it's possible. Anything's possible. It's a matter of whether there's political will.
OK, let me rephrase the question. It's not possible within the framework of our capitalist economy without causing unimaginable damage to people's lives.
Well, the damage is imaginable and it's proportionate and it's necessary because the alternative is social collapse. The fact of the matter is, and this is the major point that Extinction Rebellion is trying to say, is it's over, right, for this civilization. The reason it's over because of the hard physics. We're not making a political point or an ideological point or, you know, trying to be awkward or all the rest of it. We're simply saying that the science is real. If the science is real, it means we're facing social collapse. The reason we're facing social collapse is because of mass starvation. And the reason we're going to have mass starvation is because of the collapse in the weather systems around the world.
You're setting a target which would mean that people couldn't use combustion engine vehicles anymore. They couldn't fly anymore. They couldn't use gas to heat their homes anymore.
The public is starting to get round to the idea that we're facing social collapse. Like before April, before there were 1,200 arrests in the streets of London, in the biggest civil disobedience protest in British history, the British public didn't have any opinion on the climate emergency. Afterwards, 67% of the British public agree there is one.
You want to bring down the capitalist system as we know it. Is that fair?
The capitalist system is going to be brought down by itself. The capitalist system is eating itself.
But the point about your movement is that...
let me make this point clear, right? The capitalist system, the global system that we're in, is in the process of destroying itself, and it will destroy itself in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
The reason for that is because it's destroying the climate. The climate is what's necessary to grow food. If you can't grow food, there'll be starvation and social collapse.
How far are you prepared to take this mass civil disobedience?
This October, thousands of people will come to the streets of London and they'll stay in the streets of London. How long? I don't know, because it'll be up to them. But you'll see mass disturbances. It'll be non-violent, it'll be respectful, and it'll be disruptive. And that's the methodology that we're using. That's the method we're using. Teenagers are shitting themselves about what's happening for the future. They've got another 50, 60, 70 years to live on this planet. By that time, there could be only 1 billion people left. I mean, that's 6 billion people that have died from starvation or been slaughtered in war.